Who do you consider to be the most influential figure in gaming? Every day, us game developers make use of technology and techniques forged and perfected by our predecessors. Even one of the most intelligent humans to ever live, Isaac Newton, admitted to his rival, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Although this may have been a jab at Robert Hooke's appearance, Newton was nonetheless correct. We stand on the shoulders of those who innovated technology, computer science, and game design. Today's giant is a man by the name of William Higinbotham. We're going pretty far back today with Higinbotham, who was born in 1910 in Connecticut. He got his undergraduate degree in physics in Williams College and studied at Cornell before working at MIT in their radiation laboratory. This wasn't a lab that was literally irradiated. In fact, it was mainly for the development of radar technology. The year was 1941, and radar was cutting edge. Its advancement was paramount for the war effort. Although aerial combat was first seen in the Great War, it was much more notable in World War II, dictating the outcome of some advancements and making up the entirety of some battles. With a plane, you could drop bombs on a city without ever being seen, but not with radar. How is this important to games? Well, his work here at MIT in the early 40s would lead Higinbotham to an expertise in electronics. At MIT, he helped develop many different radar systems that were incredibly advanced. They would culminate in the most notable, the SCR 584. Although radar was again cutting-edge tech, it still worked on a fairly simple idea of physics. This microwave radar would fire microwaves into the air and read what was reflected back to determine how far in a certain direction an object was. The change in frequency and amplitude of the wave could be kept track of to calculate the object's velocity as well. This radar was able to detect aircraft out to a range of 40 miles with an accuracy of 75 feet. This was able to stop V-1 rockets, halting air raids on London. The UK's radar technology was also highly sophisticated, and RDF, as they called it, was fully implemented by the Royal Air Force by the time of the Battle of Britain. Its usage in this battle was absolutely paramount to their victory. Although William Higinbotham played a small part in World War II through radar, he was about to become a much larger part of the war's history. This is because he ended his work at MIT in 1943 by moving to the Los Alamos Laboratory. Also known as Project Y, this lab was set up by the Manhattan Project. Headed by the well-known Robert Oppenheimer, this lab was established for the creation of a nuclear weapon. Higinbotham would come to head the lab's electronics division. With his team, he would develop the ignition system for the project nuclear weapon. They would also create measuring instruments for the device. Although these developments aren't part of how the bomb actually worked and don't directly involve the study of plutonium, they're certainly an important part of the Manhattan Project's final creation. After Germany's surrender in May of 1945, Japan refused to do so. Even after copious firebombing of Japan's cities by the US, Japan's surrender still seemed distant. Although the US dropped over 60 million leaflets warning Japanese civilians of the bomb, Japan was offered an opportunity to surrender or face prompt and utter destruction by the Potsdam Declaration. Japan's Emperor Hirohito still did not. Although some may believe the weapon's use was justified for these reasons, Willie Higinbotham would make it his life's work to advocate against their use ever again. As we all know, less than a week after the second bomb was dropped, Japan announced its surrender. It is often said that although the atomic bomb ended the Second World War, radar won it. Either way, Higinbotham played a role in both. Through these years, he certainly gained the experience required to make the development in gaming history that landed him amongst who I consider to be gaming's giants. This is because after World War II, he would go on to work at Brookhaven National Laboratory in New York. This was a lab for the United States Department of Energy and was established in 1947, the same year that Higinbotham took a job there as the head of the lab's instrumentation division. This lab has been the site of some interesting advancements in science, particularly in 1967 when they patented maglev, the transportation system used primarily by high-speed trains. Additionally, last year the lab discovered a new kind of antimatter nucleus. However, the advancement we're really looking for today was in 1958 when William Higinbotham created the world's first video game, computer tennis, or tennis for two. Okay, well, there is some argument about what exactly was the very first video game. There are definitely some earlier examples which I would love to cover in later videos, but many of them were really created for study purposes, not solely for entertainment. In 1948, a whole 10 years earlier, however, the cathode ray tube amusement device, a genius name, was created and involved entertaining computer-based games. But it should be noted that players were required to overlay pictures on the screen to augment the action, and very little actually happened on the screen. Some say this would count, some may not, but I'll leave that up for you to decide. What is less up for debate was that Willie's Tennis for Two, 10 years newer, was far more advanced. Its effect on the gaming industry as a whole was much more pronounced. That being said, few people actually saw this game. The Brookhaven National Laboratory held an annual exhibition to show their work off to the public. For the 1958 convention, Higinbotham decided to create Tennis for Two, seeing that the lab's displays would pretty much be static things to look at and read about. He wanted to create an interactive experience that participants would enjoy. He decided this when he read the instruction manual for the lab's Donner Model 30 analog computer and saw that it could compute ballistics with gravity and even wind resistance. When he saw an example of a bouncing ball, his idea for Tennis for Two was born. A core internal feature of the computer that Higinbotham put to use was the Model 30's 10 amplifiers. An amplifier for an analog computer is exactly as it sounds, a device that can increase the electrical signal it receives, which is necessary to make sure that a signal can remain strong enough to run throughout the whole system. They can also add and subtract voltages from multiple sources, allowing them to do various mathematical operations. This, combined with transistor-transistor logic, is how the game was programmed. In reality, the device used vacuum tubes, not transistors, but in this sense, they achieve a very similar thing. Transistor-transistor logic can be a complicated subject for sure, but very basically, transistors can be used to create so-called logic gates that can make things happen when certain conditions are met. For example, two transistors connected in series can allow a signal to pass only when both transistors are receiving one. Essentially, there is only an output if both inputs are present. If one or both are not, then no output is created. This is called an AND gate. Other gates like this exist, like OR gates, NOT gates, and more. However, like I said, Higinbotham's game used vacuum tubes, as they were much more the standard at the time. A vacuum tube was a glass tube that contained a high vacuum, shockingly. Although they certainly work differently than transistors, the use of voltage variation for computer logic remains the same. With a combination of these, logic can be used to program many things. Although we've made it a long way in computer science, modern programming languages are still built on these same logic concepts. Higinbotham would use 4 of the computer's 10 amplifiers to generate the ball's motion, and the other 6 to sense when the ball hits the ground or the net, as well as switching control from player to player. The real innovation of the device was its ability to display multiple images seemingly at once. The game made use of a screen known as an oscilloscope, which, even in conjunction with transistor logic, couldn't be used to simply display normal images when desired like we can today. An oscilloscope wasn't for entertainment, they were primarily devices for scientific study. They are built to display varying electric voltages as a function of time. This means that any graphics Higinbotham would want needed to be drawn with the correct voltages. The problem with this was the difficulty of displaying the ball, the net, and the court all at once. To combat this, Higinbotham did make use of transistors. They had just been hitting the market in the late 50s, specifically germanium transistors. With them, he built a circuit that could switch displays very quickly. Each piece of the game, the ball, net, and court, had its own display output, and this small circuit could switch between them at a speed of 36 Hz. This was incredibly fast for the time, and honestly nearly still holds up today. Our modern flat-screen TVs have a standard refresh rate of 60 Hz, not even double of what Higinbotham achieved almost 70 years ago. Because of this quick switching, all 3 aspects of the game's graphics seemed to be displayed at once, tricking the eye. Although Higinbotham designed the device's circuitry in just a few hours, it took him and fellow technician Robert Dvorak 3 weeks to complete the device entirely. The game would end up using a 5-inch screen and 2 box-shaped controllers. The controllers would have a knob for controlling your shot angle and a button to hit the ball. Although a second knob was considered to control the velocity of the ball, or essentially the strength of your shot, Higinbotham decided that would make the controller too complicated. Hundreds lined up for a chance to play Tennis for Two at the exhibition, and Higinbotham noted that high schoolers in particular seemed glued to the game. Due to the display's popularity that year, Higinbotham decided to upgrade it for the following year. He added the ability to adjust the gravity level, specifically to simulate the gravity of the Moon or Jupiter. He also changed the display from the measly 5-inch oscilloscope to one between 10 and 17 inches, according to the Brookhaven lab. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem the lab is sure of the exact tech used for the project, as it was dismantled soon afterward. The game was mostly forgotten after this, and only a few hundred people ever even had the chance to see it. The game was brought into more popularity in the late 70s due to another one of gaming's giants, Ralph H. Baer. Specifically, he and Magnavox had held video game patents and were suing others for the use of similar products. Higinbotham was brought in to testify in various court cases when it was discovered that he had created a video game 20 years earlier. The defense attempted to have Tennis for Two declared as prior art, invalidating Magnavox's television video game patents. This did not work, but it did bring Tennis for Two into the limelight and made it be remembered as one of the very first video games ever created. These patents were obviously gotten around later, considering that Magnavox certainly does not own the entire gaming industry, but that is a story for another video. That is essentially where the story of Tennis for Two, or computer tennis, ends. However, seeing that Higinbotham wanted to be remembered not for creating the first video game, but for his work in nuclear non-proliferation, I feel that I should end the video on that note. After World War II, Higinbotham helped found the Federation of American Scientists, which worked in nuclear non-proliferation, which was an effort to stop the spread of nuclear weapons around the world and advocate against them being used or even built in the first place. Willie served as the first chairman and executive secretary for the Federation of American Scientists, as well as working as the technical editor of the Journal of Nuclear Materials Management for 20 years, from 1974 until his death in 1994. After his death, when the public pressed for more information on Tennis for Two, his son said that it is imperative that any piece on the game should also include his father's work on nuclear non-proliferation, as that is what he wanted to be remembered for. And that is all for this one, and thanks for watching.